Hello and welcome back to this C Sharp Fundamentals course, and this is the third video. And let's start then. So in this video we're going to look at data structures. Before we go on, I would like to show you what we did last time, or in the last few videos. So we've been looking at relational operators, we've been looking at if statements, logical operators, for loops, whiles, and do whiles. That's what we did last time. This time I would like to focus on how you can store different kinds of values and the concept behind variables. First of all, a variable is a letter or a name that can store a value. You can store a number. That's one of the examples. So for instance, height of a building, or as my other example, a person's name. Oh, this was a bad spelling. However, the third usage is that variables can also change the value. So as we saw in the previous videos, and especially the last video where we looked at for loops, we had a clear example of that we have some sort of variable that changes through the program. So in that case we had a specific set of numbers could be, so from 0 to 99, and we defined it using statements and those kind of stuff that we did last time, and basically saw that we can change it. On each iteration it will have a different value. Now let's look at the usage. So one of the things you need to do is to declare a variable, and that's basically when you tell the program the name and the kind of variable you want to use. And as we will see in the next slide, there's different kinds of types of variables, and they can hold different kinds of values. The second thing is that you can assign the variable a value, and that's the purpose of variable, to hold the value through the entire application process, or through the entire session, because then after the session they will be erased. So it's a temporary value that is stored inside an application. And the third usage is to actually use the variable and get the information it holds and use it interactively in your program. Here's an example of a variable, and I think we should start to get familiar with variables. The first thing that has the blue color, the int thing, is the data type. And what this tells the application, or the C# compiler, is that it might only contain integers, and that includes positive and negative and 0. Then we need to assign a name, and finally we need to assign a value. And one of the things I would like to clarify here is that name is case sensitive, and specifically in C#. So when you're planning on naming variables, it's really important that you assign it, that you use the same variable name basically, and you have to consider that it might depend on the capital letters and lower case letters and so on. It's really important. There are going to be videos, or at least there are information that you can get on any site where it comes to variables. There are different kinds of ways to write or name variables, because that's a technique as well, especially when it comes to really huge projects, when there are several developers working on the same project, and it's really important that you keep to the same way of declaring variables. That you, for instance, if it's a boolean, and we will come to what it is, it's basically it can only hold true or false. So it's like either or. can hold two values. Then there is a way to name those. And if you like to store an integer, it's probably good to write n number or something like that. And there is also a way, if you have a variable name that consists of two words, there are different kinds of ways to name them, but the common one is to put the first sentence or the first word with lowercase and the second word with uppercase. And it also and that's basically when it's a private variable. And of course there are different, I mean, there are a lot of information about that, especially when it should be a public variable. There is one way to call them, and when it's a private variable there are other ways. But let's not focus that much on it. The important thing is that you get that we declare a variable. In order to do that, we need to assign it a value, and that's a default value, so you can see 12, otherwise we won't have any value at all, and then there is no point of using a variable. We need to assign the data type, we need to assign a name. That's the three important things you need to know about variables. How to assign variables? So here I have some examples of different kinds of variable types, and if you put an equal sign, that basically means that the variable should be assigned that kind of value. And you can see a double contains 6.9, and this m, every time you see m, then usually you should think about doubles. Actually no, and decimals, I think. Yeah, decimals. A name, that's a string, so when you see these let's see, how should we form it? If you have the specific brackets on, let's see. So basically, if you look at yes or no, that's a bool, so true or false. And if you have these parentheses, so if you quotation marks, entirely forgot the word. So if you have these quotation marks and write something inside them, then you usually refer to a string. One of the things is that you have a limited amount of numbers, or actually the size of a number inside different kinds of variables. So it's not like a variable cannot be infinitely big, because there is not infinitely many storage, so it won't fit basically. So you have specific boundaries, and in this case, if you look at an integer, you can see that this is a some sort of set notation, so n such that, and then we have these boundaries, so from negative, and this really big number, and to a positive number of the same kind, as long as n is a set of integers. So for instance, if you would like to store for 42.5, then you would like to use doubles. If you would like to store some sort of text, you should use string. But if you only want to store values such as true or false, you might want to use boolean, and that's basically, we need to find the specific data type for the specific problem we have. So it depends on the problem, and it depends on the way we want to solve it, and it's good to keep using the type for its purpose, and for the purpose it actually is used for. So declaring and assigning default value, that's really important. As you know, not to assign a variable, you need to declare it first, and then you need to assign it a value. That might cause an error if the variable is used before it is assigned. So in order to avoid that error that might be caused, we need to assign it a value by default, and that's a good I think habit to have, because I mean, when you assign the value by default, you will decrease the chance that you will make the application crash. So it's kind of good habit to have. So now let's look at some variables that are declared by default. So you can see decimal, a double. The name actually should, I think, yeah, it should be a decimal. I had a mistake there. So a decimal equals 6.9. A string, so a name equals the name we want to assign it, and then we have a bool, which might be yes or no. What I mean with yes or no is actually either false or true. So when we want to display value held by a variable, we can use the console write line function. It's one of the functions you actually are going to use when you come to the when you're working in the console application development environment. So as an example, I could probably go back to my previous application, and if we erase, this was the loop example. Oh, it was not closed. If we turn to the loop example, now let's say I'm now declaring an integer, and I would like to name it integer equals 512. It's a good number. Now I will type console write line integer, and now don't forget to type console.readline. Really important. So what you see here is 512, as we want to output from this program. Yeah. So basically, if you like now to change this variable, because you can always change the variable if it's inside an application, and this can be done by typing integer equals something else, so say 789. Now let's see, if we now type console.readline, excuse me, write line, if we now type the content of the integer, so I would like to print out integer. Now see what happens. Oh, and basically we've changed the value. So 512 was the first value, we printed it out on the screen, and now we've changed the value to something different, and we got this different number on the screen as well. So 789. That was one of the examples of integers. Let's now look at some of the types that I've been talking about a lot, but I haven't defined them. So here are some of the data types, and if you look at the parentheses here, you can see or int, so it's another way of declaring the same thing. You could have written int 32, but you can always write this short version of it, and it basically will refer to the same thing. This is a 32-bit integer. Good for for loops, I think, and when you want to work with whole numbers. int64, a bit bigger, but still it's limited to integers. Boolean, as I mentioned earlier, it's either true or false, and this is also another way of defining, so you can write either Boolean or bool. It's two different ways. Float or float, and this is single precision floating point, and it's really good when you want to perform some scientific calculations. It's really good to use that. Now we have something even bigger, so double, and this is a double precision floating point. So now I'd like to emphasize here that you will actually be able to see values that can have decimal part. So you can have a decimal part, and then we have the actual decimal, and it's actually fixed precision floating point. And as I wrote there in parentheses, it's good for finance. So if you like to work with financial calculations, for instance money and so on, you would prefer to use decimal. And then one of the types I'd like to include in this table as well is date time. So it can store a time up to 100 nanoseconds. And the last variable is string, and it can store Unicode, basically text, characters. And Unicode allows you to see text of a specific writing system in the same way on all machines in the world. So it's some encoding for text. So you're familiar with, for instance, in XML, and actually in other cases, you need to specify like UTF-4 as I think, what's that? ASCII. Then you have the extended version. You have Unicode. Different kinds of ways, basically different kinds of sets of symbols, and this is a really big set of symbols. And now let's return to this question: when to use what? Integers, when you basically want to work with whole numbers, as I mentioned, then integers are really good. Float and double, scientific calculations, so you can see 5.81 times 10 to the power of 8, a typical example. And decimal, when something is about money and finance, then you should definitely use decimal. Now I think we actually have time to look at arrays, and Now let's be really quick. So arrays are used to store numbers in a specific order, and now the order matters. It's really important to know. C# is zero based, and it's arrays or zero index. So if you want to access the first value or the first item of that array, you would like to use the number 0 because it starts from 0 and it goes forward. So 0, 1, 2. So 0 element is equivalent to the one we would call 1. And it's also a difference. It might be different in other languages, so it's really important to know if the language is 0 indexed or if it's not 0 indexed. But in C# it's 0 indexed. Arrays can be indicated by these parentheses, and basically they tell us that that's an array, or actually they tell the compiler. And here I'd like to show an example. Int, so it's a typical declaration of a variable. So you put int, you put this brackets, and you enter height of the students. That's just one of the variables I like to use, and then you have these parentheses to enter some of the data you would like to have. And I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values in this case. In order to retrieve an element from an array, so I mean arrays are also variables, but basically they contain items of that particular type, because I can, as you saw on the previous page here, the integer array here, it's basically a set of all of specific integers. One way to retrieve the value is to type these brackets again, and then you need to enter what item you would like to display. If it's the first item, then you should enter 0, and from that point I think, yeah, you can just continue 1, 2, 3, etc. To change the value of an element, we need to work basically as we did with variables, which enter height of a student and use these brackets, enter 2 equals 179. This will change the content of the array. Basically the same approach as with normal variables, but instead you need to actually assign what index, so what row you like to use. And before we go on, I think it would be really great if we would look at let's see if there is If you would like to, you could look at reference 17, and that is found on page 12, to just see what we've done. So page 12. So let's see how this works. And reference 17. I'm just going to copy the code, but you can always look at it more carefully. I just want to show you how this actually works. I'm going to paste it here. And this is, I think we're using knowledge that we have discussed in earlier videos, and what we're doing right now is actually we're declaring an integer array, so a set of numbers, and we're going to use a for to go through those numbers and write them on the screen. In order to know how many numbers we have in an array, we need to enter the name of the array and put the point here and then dot length. That's one of the ways. So let's compile. Obviously, what I see on the screen is the set of those is the numbers I've plugged into the array. So here they are. Let's now summarize what we have done. So one of the things when you declare an array, and this is not a default declaration, this is just, or actually yes it is, we declare an array and we enter how many places of integers will we allow this array to have. In this case it's 10, or actually we'll be able to put 11, or actually that's one thing you should consider now. Is it 10 or is it 11? I think actually it's 10. No, I shouldn't have said this. It's not 11. It's 10 items that you can put into an array by declaring it in that way. So another way of declaring heights of students would have been to just use this notation and explicitly type that it's an integer array. So here int and then equals new int brackets, and then we have these parentheses, enter the values. So we're explicitly telling that this array here that we are putting into this variable is actually an integer array. But of course that's just an unnecessary step, especially for integers. Because if you look here, we're basically saving a lot of space, and it's really great, especially when it comes to when you want to save some space basically. So let's look at the demo, and in this demo we like to, and actually I think we've done this. I think I did it too early. So what we can see here, this is basically the demo. We're declaring an integer array, and now let's just remove this declaration, this explicit declaration, and compile, and we see the same thing. There is no difference at all. And here, so this was the demo, and now let's go to the final conclusion. And yippee, we have now gone through that the arrays, and we now know that if we like to find the amount of elements in an array, or items, whatever you like to call it, you need to use this dot length thing. Then you will be able to know how big that array is actually in. However, we can only make 4 iterations because arrays are 0 based, so this array will consist of 5 items, but as you know, it's 0 based, so it will start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we have now learned, hopefully, is that when you want to create a new data a variable, you need to assign it a specific data type. And that's because C# is strongly typed. It requires you to enter what kind of data type it is. What are you working with at that particular point? And we worked with arrays. With other words, lists. So once again, thank you very much for watching this video. I think this turned out to be too long, and I don't know about the ending. Probably the ending turned out to be a bit too quick, so we went through it really quickly. But I would like you to look at the reference booklet again, and look through reference 17, reference 18. I think that's enough for this lesson. Now, I also would like you to do, or actually I would like to recommend you to do the exercises. Here, preparation 3. So basically, this is just to answer these questions, and I think basically it's just theoretical questions. So you like I think if you know the answer on these questions, then you have received, and I think you have learned a lot. If you have trouble with some, you've still learned a lot, I think. But just try to really look into the questions, because it's really important that you will be able to answer those. And if you haven't done the questions that are available in preparation 2, I'd like to show you that they exist, and that's basically for you to practice on application development, basically how to write a simple application. Really important to look at if you have some time. And other stuff, other things we've gone through, so like arrays can be found on page 4, variables, different types. So I think this is kind of a summary as well. I think this is directly taken from the presentation. So this we've been looking at in this tutorial. We've been looking at primitive types, but of course there are types that are custom, that you can create a type, and this is something that won't be in this course, because then we are talking about object-oriented programming, OOP. That's a totally different area, but I think just for now on, it's good that you would practice on those, just to know how to use primitive types. So once again, thank you for watching this video, and once again, I'd like to make some sort of cliffhanger here. And the next video will be about functions and methods. We're going to look at how it's possible to work with functions, and if you're familiar with functions from math, and we're going to look at what methods are. So once again, third time, thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely day.